Today's video is all about maintaining repertoire. Knowing how to keep a piece in our fingers, so to speak, is very important to us, isn't it? And quite often just playing through it doesn't work. Are you sitting comfortably? Then let's begin. I read a really interesting book a while ago by William Westney called The Perfect Wrong Note. And he brought up a concept in there that I've sort of nicknamed for myself the piano performance account. Simply put, whenever we actually practice a piece, we're sort of putting money into that account, okay? So we're building a balance as we go. However, when we just play it through, what we're effectively doing is taking money out of the account. And if we play it through too often without putting any money back by practicing, then ultimately we'll run out. And one of the reasons I really like this concept is that it certainly answers the question that I'm sure a lot of us see, that why do things deteriorate over time? And basically what William Westney says is that we need to avoid complacently playing through our repertoire. So how do we turn that then into concrete advice? And I think it's good really to think about, how do we get a plan to maintain a piece? And a good starting point to me is perhaps the things that we found difficult about it in the first place. Those bits that we needed to practice the most to get them to come right are probably the ones that will deteriorate the fastest. And I don't think this is uniquely in terms of what we found technically difficult. What about things like memorization, bits that we struggle to memorize properly? Will we be able to remember these long term too? So as we start thinking about these things, then we can put a plan together. And I thought to demonstrate this, I'd take an example of Chopin's B minor Waltz. This is a piece that I've played for years and years and years, and it's something that I must admit I've complacently played through more times than I can remember. And it's also a piece that I found that when I really looked at it carefully, had certainly deteriorated a lot. I once recorded it, and to my horror found I was ghosting lots and lots of the left-hand chords. And it was only on the recording that I really heard it. I also noticed that I was scrambling around a lot in the third section with the repeated notes and the thirds. And there were a couple of other places where my memory was a little unreliable, let's say. And even when playing for music, don't forget, if we're looking at our hands at any point, then we're sort of relying on our memory for those moments. So in the first section of this, I find it's a good idea to practice that left hand unmusically on a regular basis. Now by this I mean playing it firmly, without any particular musical shape, and focusing on ensuring every note and chord sounds. In fact, practicing unmusically is another idea I got from The Perfect Wrong Note. William Westney argues that not all practice need be musical, and it can often be helpful to do the reverse of what we eventually want as part of our regular practice. So here, rather than focusing on keeping the left hand under the melody, let's bring it out to the fore. However, bearing in mind step 2 divided my 4-step process, then I would avoid practicing the entire section end to end. For maintenance purposes, I've split it into a couple of segments, and I practice each of these individually. Now the second section presents similar challenges, so again I split this down into 3 segments for my revision work. It was in this section that I also found a couple of areas where my memory wasn't totally secure, which often resulted in wrong notes. Here it's worth isolating those particular bits and working on them individually. Now the third section was the one I found the most technically challenging. There are a couple of things about it really. One of them is changing fingers on repeated notes. The other is playing the thirds. Now, given this is the section I found the hardest, it's also the section that's probably likely to deteriorate the most over time. Therefore, to practice this, I'll go right back to practicing it in the smallest snippets rather than longer segments as for the other sections. And also I'll do it in a few different ways. Now, a first way is the 4/4 time idea. This gives us 3 different versions by changing one of the beats into a half note rather than a quarter to give us 4 beats in each bar. When we add this to the 3/4 version, that means we have 4 different ways of practicing each of these snippets. So first we can work on the first snippet. Then the second. And then both of these snippets together. We can equally do this with the next 8 measures, again splitting them down first. Afterwards we practice all 16 measures together, although probably by now only in 3/4 time. The next segment of this section we can split down in a similar manner, with a couple of measures of thirds first, then a couple of measures where we need to change fingers on one or more notes. Again, let's use the 3/4 time versions first, each for 2 measure snippets, practicing it alone. Then we can combine the first 2 snippets and practice them together, as well as the second 2 snippets afterwards. Only after doing this do we try practicing this segment of the section in one go. Another way of practicing this is by starting from the end and working forwards. This time we practice the final snippet, then the one before it, before combining the 2. Then we work on the preceding one in isolation, before putting it and the 2 others together. We continue in this manner until we get to the first snippet and are playing the entire segment in one go. As a general maintenance idea, it does no harm to also use the heavy left hand here from time to time. Now the final section is basically a mixture of the first and the second, so note-wise nothing really changes. As such, aside ensuring we properly identify the tiny differences to ensure our memory doesn't start playing tricks, we probably don't need to maintain this part so very much. However, then I think another vital part of maintenance is that of practicing performing. Now performing is a different mindset, of course, and in Graham Fitch's eBook series there's a separate volume devoted to practicing for performing. One essential element of performing, of course, is that we can't correct mistakes. We have to totally shift our mindset from seeking perfection, if you like, to seeking beauty. As Beethoven once said, to play a wrong note is insignificant, to play without passion is inexcusable. So now we need to focus on playing without worrying so much about technical control and putting more effort into interpretation. Thus, even now, we're not simply complacently playing through, we're actively rehearsing. These days in my practice app, for these 2 items on my maintenance list, I have 2 major tasks, a general maintenance task and a rehearse task. I think about both separately and focus attention in different ways for each one. So try this out for yourself on one of your old pieces. First, break it down into smaller chunks in a similar way that I did with this B minor waltz. Then think about the things that you found the most difficult and perhaps the things that are not quite as reliable as they used to be now, and then come up with a plan to practice around those areas. I bet you'll see a marked improvement once you start doing this in an organised manner. Certainly I have to say that I did. Now, if you'd like any more information on how I go about creating a proper nested hierarchy, and in fact where the idea came from, I've linked a video here that I'm sure you'll find very interesting. If you're not already, then please do subscribe to Tommy's Piano Corner. Click the little bell icon so you're notified of new videos as and when they're released. I thank you very much for watching today and look forward to seeing you very soon.